Burnett from the Greens, and Ged Kearney, our sitting member from Labour, and Kath Larkin from the Victorian Socialists. And also to Professor John Wiseman, who is our MC or chair or moderator or something, the most important person, with us tonight. So DCAN has run these forums for many elections now, as many of you will know, and we really think it's a really important part of our democratic process to give a chance for us to hear, us as voters, to hear from our candidates on what we think is the most important issue for the election and for our future, which is climate change. So there are 6 candidates standing in Cooper. The Liberal candidate, Stuart Todd-Hunter, didn't respond to any of my invitations. And our policy is only to invite candidates from parties who do have climate policies. The Legalised Cannabis Party, whose candidate is Donna Stolzenberg, does have some pro-environmental policies, which are quite good, but nothing that we could find that was actually on climate. And the One Nation Party, whose candidate is William Turner, doubts the reality of climate change and wants us to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. Yeah. So we didn't invite them. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and to pay respects to elders past and present, and to any First Nations people who are here, who are following this online tonight. As we all know, First Nations people have cared for this country for many millennia and have never ceded sovereignty. And we also know that their country is being damaged terribly by climate change, and that many First Nations communities are on the front line in terms of feeling the impacts of climate change, as well as the health and environmental impacts of fossil fuel mining, which is what is driving climate change. So we in DCAN strive to work with First Nations people in protecting their land from the devastation of fossil fuel mining and climate change, and ensuring climate justice for all, and we stand with them calling for truth, treaty and voice. So John's going to tell you more about how things are going to go tonight, but I'll just start off with a few little details. First of all, Robert here is recording the event, so it will be soon up on website and things like that. Tangent is also live streaming this, she hopes, on Facebook. And we also will probably be taking a few photos. Libby, who is somewhere here, right at the back, will take some photos, but probably of people's the backs of people's heads rather than the fronts. So if you have any objections to that, I'll let her know. What else? The obvious ones, please make sure your phone is on silent. And I don't think mine is. I hope nobody rings in the next 2 minutes.
You got a bucket of water.
And the other housekeeping we always have to say is, where's the toilets? You go down this corridor to the front door, turn right, and then you'll find them on your left. And as you have no doubt worked out, we're using Slido for you to ask questions of candidates. So if you don't have a phone or you can't work out the instructions and you want to ask a question of one or all of the candidates, put your hand up and someone will come and help you. So now it's my pleasure to introduce John. So Professor John Wiseman is a writer and a researcher, and I've only recently discovered he's also a beautiful photographer. He's also a local who's lived in Thornbury for many years, near Mary Creek. And he holds several significant positions. He's a senior research fellow with the Melbourne Climate Futures and an adjunct professor at the School of Population and Global Health, which are both at Melbourne Uni. He's a board member of that great organisation, the First Economy, that some of you will know of. And he's a research fellow at the Centre for Policy Development. So he's a busy man. And among many other things, he is the author of a terrific book, which I really recommend, called Hope and Courage in the Climate Crisis, which I think has got really important messages for us, a very thoughtful, fairly philosophical book, but a helpful book. And then he's just recently published this book, Regional Energy Transitions in Australia, which tells the stories of the journeys that communities in the Latrobe Valley, in Collie, in Western Australia, Hunter Valley and elsewhere, have been through in their transition away from fossil fuels, what's gone well, gone right and what has not gone so well, which I think is really important learnings for us as we move through this transition. So, as you can hear, he is a very busy man, so I'm really delighted that he was willing to take on this role tonight, and please make him welcome.
Thank you. It's fantastic to see such a full house. It's really wonderful. And I'd like to also begin just by acknowledging the Indigenous people on whose unceded lands we're meeting, and pay my respects to elders past and present. And that acknowledgement's important for lots of reasons, including many that Anne has touched on. I guess also, amongst other things, the awareness that we are meeting in an electorate named after a great Australian Indigenous activist, William Cooper. And William Cooper's fierce commitment to open all the doors which might lead to justice for his people, I think is a powerful reminder of why we're here tonight. We're here tonight to hear from the candidates for Cooper their views about the doors and pathways and actions which can significantly reduce the risks and consequences of the climate emergency, which we now are aware is accelerating all around us. Anne's asked me to just say a couple of things about, I guess, the importance of this election, the importance of why we're here in relation to the climate crisis. And I must say I had a slightly challenging moment when Anne asked me how long I'd lived in Northcote and Thornbury, and it suddenly struck me that it's about 40 years, which was a little bit confronting. And some of you, many of you, will have lived around these parts for quite a while, and there's been lots of changes. Some of them, generally, in my view, perhaps in your view, have been quite good. I think more gelato shops in High Street, by and large, a good thing. Bakeries, music venues, more trees and birds and bicycles on Merry Creek, all good. And a lot more solar panels on roofs and batteries on our walls. But of course the climate change news over these 10, 15, 20, 30 years has not been as good as that. Has not been so great. I don't think I will labour the point to this audience, but I think it is important just to set the scene. This is a quote from, a very recent quote from one of the world's most eminent climate scientists, former UK Chief Scientist Professor Sir David King, just a week ago. And he says this: "Last year marked a historic and deeply troubling threshold. For the first time, global temperatures exceeded 1.5 degrees C above pre-industrial levels. Without drastic and immediate climate action, this breach will not be temporary. The consequences, rising sea levels, extreme weather and devastating loss of biodiversity, are no longer projections for the distant future. They are happening now, affecting millions of lives and likely to cause trillions in damages in decades to come." So watching the news about the rapid rise in CO2 levels and global temperatures, record-breaking heat waves in India or the latest floods in Lismore can, I know for all of us, be overwhelming, not to mention the latest crazy statements coming out of the White House. So the question I think many of us keep coming back to is, how do we sustain realistic, active, defiant hope in the face of such disturbing evidence and such confronting news? Active hope, as the great ecological philosopher and activist Joanna Macy reminds us, doesn't mean false optimism or wishful thinking. Active hope, she says, involves a readiness to discover the size and strength of our hearts, our quickness of mind, our steadiness of purpose, our love for life, the liveliness of our curiosity, the unsuspected deep well of patience and diligence, the keenness of our senses, and our capacity to lead. Which is why, I imagine, many of us are here tonight. We are acutely aware that we've arrived at a critical moment in the struggle to create and restore a just and regenerative safe climate future. We're determined, many of us, to open all the doors leading to stronger and more effective climate action. And we're therefore keen and curious to hear the views of our three election candidates about the climate action leadership priorities for the next Government of Australia. So here's the deal. Here's what we're going to do. Each of the candidates are going to speak for 5 minutes each on 3 questions, which I'll mention in a second, which they've been sent previously. And we've drawn their names out of a hat, So the speaking order will be, as you can see, along the table. So they'll each speak for 5 minutes, and then we'll have Q&A. And Q&A, as Anne has said, will be via Slido. So somebody's going to bring me an iPad with your questions, and can I encourage you again to put questions in, but also to vote. I think you can't vote for. You can vote for the ones you like. I think only one for each question. I don't think you can vote too many times for each one. But certainly please add your vote, and then we'll try and prioritise the ones that are most popular. We'll have a good 30 or 40 minutes for questions, and then candidates will have 2 minutes for, if you like, a closing statement. Ground rules, expectations. Please, everyone be respectful. We want to focus on climate in the broader sense, and on the whole, where we can, while we're keen to encourage a conversation, no interruptions or talking over each other. So, with that in mind, I'm going to hand over, first of all, to Tara Burnett, who I think won the ballot for first cab off the rank. So, Tara, over to you for 5 minutes. And our questions, I should just repeat, are these. Why are you standing as a candidate in this election? What does acting on the climate emergency mean to you? And if elected, what will you do to ensure the strongest possible climate action?
Yeah, thank you so much, John, and thank you so much, everybody, for choosing to spend your Tuesday night here. Hearing from your local candidates about the climate. I see that as like a commitment from everyone in this room and everybody on the live stream there, that they will keep the climate at the front of their minds when they go in to vote at some point over the next 2.5 weeks, and that's extremely important. My name is Tara Burnett. I'm a local public school teacher, unionist and renter. I live just up the road there in Preston. I've lived a few different lives before coming to here, worked in all manner of fields from a brewery to higher education research to the military. But I want to contribute and to be a part of a team that is arguing for better and arguing that we can achieve better than what we have and what we've been told is within the realms of possibility. I stood and was elected to the State Branch Council of the Australian Education Union. I stood and was elected to the Board of Transgender Victoria, and now I'm standing for election here in the seat of Cooper with the aim of representing you for standing up for the climate and becoming the first trans MP elected to any parliament anywhere in the country. When I think about acting on the climate emergency, I think that what you said, quoting from Professor David King about drastic action is absolutely right. This is no longer an issue that can be solved by tinkering around the edges. The time to talk about climate change is over. We're now speaking of climate crisis and climate emergency because that is where we have already found ourselves. And extreme action is needed. Unfortunately, we are seeing extreme action, but it is action to exacerbate it, action to increase the amount of coal and gas mines being opened, to increase the amount of fossil fuels that are being put into our atmosphere, to increase the amount of emissions that this country contributes to, both through our own domestic use of power and through what we export at horrifically low prices, so low that other countries are making a profit on selling Australian gas because we don't take this seriously. It means needing to actually take a stand, needing to not only stop opening up new coal and gas mines, but stop the massive handouts in terms of tax breaks and grants that are offered to the biggest polluters in this country. We need to be stepping up in terms of prioritising values, not old battle lines that have been drawn and rendered useless by the urgency of the climate crisis, but speaking to people in terms of values, speaking to people in terms of getting people together to look at what we really want instead of just having it based on what a platform might be. That means thinking about the ways that we lay our cities out, the ways that we engage in trade, engage in citizens' assemblies. I know is a very popular one, and acknowledging that we are in a climate emergency and really acting on that. We need to think about the fact that we have actually a record of having strong climate action in this country, but the strongest climate action that has been taken this century happened during the last time, the only time this century, that we had a hung parliament where Labor was supported by the Greens to pass some incredibly strong climate legislation that never would have happened without that. And so let's make sure that we can recreate those conditions, recreate strong climate action, and take the steps that are so urgently needed. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Tara, and thanks, John. It's actually an honour to meet you. It's very exciting. And thank you to Darebin Climate Action Now for hosting this important debate. This is actually a hallmark of election campaigns, and I'm very excited to be here tonight. It's a great way to engage with all of you, to test ideas, to hear directly from voters, and for you to hear directly from your candidates. And I just want to thank DCAN for everything that they do. You really are an incredible organisation. You push us to be more ambitious, more courageous, more effective on climate, and thank you so much for your support over the years and the vital work that you do. We are, of course, on the Wurundjeri people's lands, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Now, I stand before you tonight not just as the member for Cooper, a position I've held since 2018, in which I'm incredibly privileged and honoured to hold, and not just as a nurse, you know, once a nurse, always a nurse. My daughter's been texting me relentlessly about my sick grandchild today. Or as a former ACTU president, where, as John knows, we fought so hard for a just transition for workers, and I'm incredibly proud of what we did there. But I am also talking to you as a grandma. I am a grandma of 6 beautiful grandchildren, and like any grandparent, I want them to live very long, fruitful lives, surrounded by the beauty of our rivers, our bushlands, and our native animals. I do worry deeply about what they will inherit. It does keep me awake at night. Climate change is not a distant threat, it's here. As John so distinctly put in his opening remarks, it's damaging our environment, our health, our economy, and too often it's those who've done the least to cause it are the hardest hit by it. For too long we were stuck. For a decade under the coalition, governments either denied climate science altogether or actively sabotaged any action. We were also stuck as a movement. Too many Australians, especially in regional areas, felt left behind, unheard in the conversation about their future. So as ACTU president, I remember distinctly how hard it was to build their trust, to start those conversations with them, to demand from everybody a just transition for those workers. But we did it. We did it together. Community groups, unions, students, NGOs, everyday people helped shift the national mood. And in 2022, Australians voted for climate action. We know they did. And for a government that would not leave anyone behind in the process. So let me be honest, the transition is hard. Rebuilding our energy system, rewiring the nation, maintaining a social licence is incredibly complex work. But we are doing it. There's a long way to go, but we have done an enormous amount to get us on the right track. We are building the foundations upon which we can put a good, solid roof. We're going to reach 82% renewables by 2030. We're already at 46. We will possibly be at 50 by the end of this election. That is huge. In 3 short years, we've got us there. We've enshrined emission reduction targets in law. Our capacity investment scheme has been oversubscribed. Our safeguard mechanism is cutting the emissions of 215 of our biggest emitters by 5%. Every year, we have $22 billion Future Made in Australia plan, which is literally revolutionising energy manufacturing in this country. We've invested $19 billion to rebuild the electricity grid. New vehicle efficiency standards. We've legislated a water trigger, protected 50% of our oceans, 30% of our land. We've become the green hydrogen capital of the world with a pipeline investments worth $200 billion in green hydrogen. We've invested $1.6 billion for energy efficiency upgrades for solar for households, businesses, social housing, and just last week we rolled out a $2.3 billion cheaper home battery program. I am personally responsible, very proud of, our climate and health strategy, and we are training thousands of workers to make this all happen. We are embedding climate action into every corner of government, from health to infrastructure to diplomacy, and we are doing all of this with climate justice at the centre. We can't risk disenfranchisement, we have to keep everyone along. And we've established the Net Zero Authority, which John is working with to do that. We're working alongside First Nations communities, recognising the importance of cultural knowledge, supporting Indigenous-led conservation and renewable energy projects on country. In just 3 short, incredible years, we have absolutely made real measurable progress and laid the foundations for climate action in the next decade. Are we finished? No, not by a long shot. But we are finally moving, and we are doing it with urgency and determination. We are doing it. And I need all of you to continue to work alongside with me while we do this fight. So many people in this room looking at you have been there with me in every step of the way. I've brought you to Parliament. I've put you in front of ministers. I've put you in front of everybody that you need, and we will keep fighting at that table. And you know what? I am your voice at that table, and that is why you need to keep me there. Thank you.
I'm Kath. I grew up in this area, went to school here, had my first job here. One of my teachers is in the room tonight. So I too want to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land that was never ceded. First Nations people in this country have been resisting colonisation and oppression since day one, and particularly given our topic tonight, it's worth acknowledging that First Nations people are very often the people not just at the front line of experiencing climate change, but of fighting it and of fighting the capitalist greed that's destroying our planet. So the first environment policy I wanted to flag is the Victorian Socialists are for a treaty with First Nations people that specifically provides them veto power over businesses and commercial use of their land. It is absolutely time that we prioritise Indigenous land rights over the profit and destruction of our planet. So why am I standing? Well, as a socialist, I'm driven by a lot of things, but a big one is inequality, which in this country is growing. More and more people are reliant on food banks. Everyone I talk to is just finding it that much harder at the moment. The fact that grocery prices have gone up at double the rate of our wages. It's a tough time for most of us, but the 200 parasites on the AFR rich list are doing just fine, thank you very much, having increased their wealth from 520 billion to 625 billion. We couldn't possibly have a super profit tax. You know what we could do with $105 billion? A lot of things, but you could, for instance, cancel all HECS debt and lift everybody out of poverty by raising, or lift millions of people out of poverty by raising the welfare rate to $88 a day. There's much better ways that we could be spending the money in this society for social good. What does it mean to take climate change seriously and to fight it? I think it means acknowledging that climate change is a product of capitalism, a system that turns everything into a resource to be exploited for profits. And that means market solutions will not work to stem the tide. Instead, we need to fundamentally restructure the entire economy and take the profits of the fossil fuel barons and other corporations who benefit from destroying our planet on. So that's why Victorian Socialists want to fight to bring power back into public hands, to adopt a whole of economy emergency plan to shift to 100% of electricity from renewables by 2030, to establish a new publicly controlled renewable energy operator with a charter to secure long-term energy security, ensuring cheap, reliable, renewable power and generating tens of thousands of well-paid public sector jobs, to transition to a zero-emissions economy by 2035, And obviously, it's disgraceful that this hasn't already happened, but implement an immediate ban on new coal mines and a ban on coal-fired power by 2030, end fracking and all unconventional gas extraction, no new gas projects. And of course, to do all of that in a just transition, to guarantee alternative, secure jobs and retraining for workers from the fossil fuel industry, to ban the logging of our native forests and establish an urgent program of reforestation, sustainable farming and biodiversity protection. And I know that there's a lot of people here who are in various ways part of communities doing that sort of work, like the Friends of Mary Creek. And of course, to end uranium mining and oppose any attempt to build an Australian nuclear industry. So what would I do if elected? Well, fight for everything I've just listed in Parliament, but also on the streets, in the schools, on campuses, in workplaces. I know that even if a couple of socialists are elected to Parliament, you're not just going to be able to rain progressive change down from above. It's a hell of a fight that we've got. Both major parties are committed to funding and supporting the fossil fuel industry. The Labor government spent $14.5 billion in the last year, which was an increase on the previous year. So things are getting worse despite the promises going into the last election. So if elected, I will stand my ground in Parliament and use that platform to elevate the voice of every single young person, every parent, all of the great majority of this country who want to see an end to the burning of our planet. Thanks.
So, congratulations to everyone for staying right on time and to our timekeeper for keeping everyone on time. As I said, we're going to now take some questions from Slido. I'm going to go slightly off script. I'm going to ask our timekeeper, in fact, to just make sure, just time 2 minutes, because that'll give me a chance to look at the questions, but also a chance for you just to talk to the person next to you, just for 2 minutes, about your responses, your reactions. What did you find appealing? What did you find surprising? So can you time us, timekeeper, 2 minutes, and there'll be a bell, we'll bring you back after 2 minutes, and then we'll move into Q&A, but just for a minute or two, talking to the person next to you, okay? So over to you for 2 minutes. Yeah, lots to talk about, and lots of questions. We have lots here. I think by this count, over 30 questions here, so we'll get through as many as we can in the next 40 minutes. And of course, as the way this works is people have put in questions and then people have voted for them. So we will start from those which have got the most votes. And at the top of the list, and I think, let's think in order here, we might start at the other end to begin with on this application. And we'll ask perhaps a minute or so each in terms of initial responses. Let's see how we go with that. And the first one is very specific, short. If elected, will you halt the approval of new or expanded coal and gas mines? Kath, you get first crack at this.
Yes, absolutely. It should already have been done. The Labor Party got into government with the promise of action on the climate emergency, but allowing more of these is making things worse. It's getting us closer and closer to those very dangerous tipping points.
Ged.
Well, as everyone knows, we have an EPBC Act that is absolutely broken and unworkable, and we did our best to get the new EPBC Act through in the last term. It just didn't happen. We could have had an independent EPA by now, which would have taken this question away from government. But what I just want to say is that Tanya has really done incredible work. Where she can, under the current laws, not approve a mine, she has. There's 2 coal mines she hasn't approved. She has not approved any new coal mines. That is an absolute lie. She has actually approved the extension of 10 metallurgic coal mines. They are not thermal coal, they're metallurgic coal mines. And under the current laws, she's had 3 gas extensions as well. She has approved 13 critical mineral mines, and that is it. And until we get new EPBC laws in this country, which we are desperate to do, and we will attempt to do again in the next term of government, we are really, our absolute hands are tied with that. Tanya has done her very best, I think, in this respect as Environment Minister. It's messy, it is not easy, it is very complex, and I would love nothing more than to be able to say, yes, I could do that, but with the current laws, we can't.
and Tara. Actually, I've passed the, I think we'll use the mic where we can.
Oh,
Sure,
could you
we can
give me
snag
that?
it.
Yeah, sorry. My union voice.
Yeah. You're all spared from my teacher voice, thanks to the presence of this microphone. Yeah, absolutely. There's no reason we should continue. Many of you will have seen around the streets of Cooper, various environmental groups have put up signs, rock posters, placards, things of this nature about the climate emergency. You'll notice they've all got different numbers because the amount of new coal and gas projects approved under this government continues to go up. We can beat around the bush, we can fiddle around the edges saying, well, it's an extension, it's not a new one, things like this. But the fact is that our emissions are continuing to go up because of these new coal and gas projects, and the government can choose to step in. And from the sounds of it, when we consider a number of things that have happened over this term of government, Tony Plebesek's worst enemy on climate action is Anthony Albanese, and the amount of times that she's been overruled in her position as Environment Minister.
Thank you. So there's a number of questions, you won't be surprised, that talk about the questions about banning new coal and gas projects. The next one, and I'll read it as it's come through because it's had a lot of votes, and maybe we'll run this order back the other way. So Tara, you first. But the question is, well, no, I think actually probably the way this is phrased, Ged, it probably does come to you first. Labor has refused to ban new coal and gas projects, so it's building on the previous question. Given these generate 75% of our emissions, why would I vote for somebody who will just vote on party lines? I think that probably is first of all to you, Ged.
Well, it's hard to say in a minute, but of course we all want the same thing. We do not want more coal and gas. We want to see the end of fossil fuels. Kath does, Tara does, I do. Everyone here in this room wants that. This is kind of like the roof on a house that we are going to build. What the Labor government is doing is we are setting about establishing, we are digging the foundations, we are putting in the plumbing, we are putting in the wiring, we're building the walls so we can put that roof on. If I was to say tomorrow to those communities that John works with, in the Hunter, in Collie, in far north Queensland, in Tasmania, you know, we're going to turn everything off tomorrow, do you think Australia would vote for us? I don't have the luxury of Tara of just talking to people who believe her, who are with her, who are onto it. As government, I don't have that luxury. Kath talks to a slightly broader audience, I must admit. So, Kath, you've got a little bit harder too. But I don't have that luxury. I have to talk to those communities. I have to bring them along. I have to make sure they don't vote for Peter Dutton. And we have to work as hard as we can to get to zero emissions. We've got to do it. We are doing it. We are building those foundations. Look at what we are doing. I read it all out. We are doing it. It's hard. It's messy. It's complex. We're doing it.
Kath or Tara, do you want to sort of say anything about that?
Yeah, look, I just think we do need immediate action. And yes, it has to be done working with the workers in all of those areas and those communities. But we've had a long time to talk about just transitions, to talk about, transforming this industry. But that isn't happening. We need concrete. It's not though. There are coal mines are continuing to be expanded. The Labor government is not doing what is necessary to set up a just transition. We should be bringing power back into public hands. You can drive down the cost and you can use that to rapidly transition to 100% renewables. This needs to happen. You need to have a serious attitude. And just saying it's hard, we keep trying, but we just have to keep funding fossil fuel companies, it just doesn't wash.
Tara.
Yeah, thank you. I absolutely agree with Kath. I'm not sure about we don't need to speak. The Greens do run in every seat the Labor Party runs in. Don't have the same reach thanks to a combination of inertia, media and financial backing, some of it from those same fossil fuel companies. And I do question, what they believe that they're getting from the Labor Party when they donate to them. If not that continued tax carve-out and continued approval. Absolutely, turning a big boat around takes time, but you kind of need to start moving the steering wheel rather than exacerbating the issue if we want to get this stuff improved.
A carbon tax would have helped to do that a decade or so ago.
Very happy to speak to that.
There's a lot of questions here. People have talked, all our speakers have talked about regional transitions, just transitions, in broad terms. There's a question here which has lots of votes, which is really, I guess, asking for a bit more detail. What are your plans to bring regional communities who've been relying on fossil fuels for centuries on side with renewables? And I imagine implicit in this is and without leaving anyone behind. So I guess this is more than just, yes, this is a good idea. I think people are interested in what specific actions would you suggest would be valuable for this. Maybe I'll work back from Tara to Ged to Kath on this occasion.
Certainly, and because our regional communities are diverse and do reflect the diversity of this country, there's of course not going to be any one-size-fits-all situation. The crucial thing with it, though, is not going to be waiting until it's too late, because a transition is going to come sooner or later, right, for these communities. Either we can get in before it's too late, or it'll get to a situation where it's unviable because of health problems in the area or because of running out of the fossil fuel they're mining, right? The whole point is that these are non-renewable resources, right? And so getting in ahead of time, investing in education is going to be the most crucial thing, making sure that education is accessible both geographically and financially.
Oh my God! Sorry. It's not going to go
and
further.
Perhaps that reflects the scale of the emergency we are dealing with.
I think you can give another 15 seconds. I think.
15 seconds is it? Yeah. It requires consultation with communities, it requires investment in education, and it requires making that accessible with plans made in consultation with those communities, with the backing of the government rather than relying on private industry to sort it out.
Favourite question, and I wish I had more than a minute to answer it, because since I was president of the ACTU, I have absolutely lived for a just transition. Years and years and years ago, I was, as president of the ACTU, I brought unions, I brought workers, I brought environment groups, I brought legislators, I brought local governments, I brought everyone together in a massive a conference in Canberra where we talked about these very things. And the day that Tony Burke stood up in Parliament and legislated the Net Zero Economy Authority, I tell you what, I cried, because it was the absolute culmination of something that I had worked for over 20 years. We have the Net Zero Authority. It is there to do exactly this. It is there to, and John works with it, so he knows this. It is there to work with transitioning economies to make sure that workers aren't left behind, that there are new businesses established. Look what we've done in Collie. We've absolutely transformed Collie from being a town that relied solely on coal-fired power stations and coal. We're working with the people in the Hunter Valley really intensely with the people up there. We are training, retraining thousands and thousands of workers through free TAFE. See, I knew a minute wasn't long enough. We are doing so much in this area to make that transition just for workers, to make sure that there are sustainable, renewable economies. Just think of the money we poured into Wollongong, into the steelworks. Sorry, I could go forever. There's a lot.
Thanks. Yeah, one of my comrades, Jeremy Small, who ran as our state upper house candidate in the Victorian election, spent a bit of time visiting coal mining towns, talking to workers, and found a pretty similar thing, that they know that this is terrible for the environment. They don't particularly love the job, but the income it gives them obviously is important. But most of them, if there was a equally well-paid job to walk into the next day, in the same area, would take it. And so that's what we need to build. And mostly you can. There is so much space in these areas to decommission the mines, and the other surrounding infrastructure, and to build great swathes of wind turbines and other forms of renewable energy. But there's the capacity to do all of this, to retrain people, to give people apprenticeships and retraining to allow that to happen. I think all of this will be crucial.
And stay, because there's a bunch of questions on this, and I'm going to give everyone, because there's a bunch of questions, I've got to allow you to expand a bit. But there's a series of questions here about vulnerable communities and renters and people who are doing it hard, which is a slightly different question to workers, perhaps.
Yes.
I wonder if you want to stay with that, Kath, and we'll work back this way. Tell me about...
Yeah, well, I think that climate change really adds to inequality and presents real threats to people's capacity to live well. The extremely high cost of energy means that in the extreme temperatures it's difficult for people to afford the necessary heating or cooling. We know that in Australia significant numbers of people are still dying as a result of this. None of this needs to happen. Bringing down that cost of energy, which you can do by making it renewable, by bringing it into public hands, would significantly ease that burden. We also think for people on the age pension that they should have a 50% discount on their electricity. There's just simple things that we can do to make life easier for people. One of our housing policies is about having a national rental inspectorate that conduct regular checks on rental properties to make sure they are actually habitable, to make sure that they do have thermal control.
Thank you. Ged?
Okay, so I'll start with health, because I was really pleased to announce and to launch our climate and health strategy, which many people in this room contributed to and supported me with that, so thank you very much for that. And the climate and health strategy talks a lot about the things that Kath just mentioned. People need safe places to go in heat waves, for example. How do we care for people's mental health when they live in risk areas of bushfires and floods, for example? What are we doing when tropical diseases are slowly but surely moving south? These are all sorts of things that the climate and health strategy deals with, and I've only got a minute, I can't go into that right now. Social housing, we're actually putting a lot of funding into making sure that social housing can have solar panels on it, that apartment blocks can have, people who live in apartment blocks can get access to social housing. We're subsidising the cost of batteries, community batteries, so that people can actually get cheaper energy that is stored during the day when it's really hot and can be distributed to them at night time at the cheaper cost. So we're doing a lot around this issue, and it's... I've only got a minute. But we are aware of this, we're alive to this, and we are doing quite a bit. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, because this isn't a hypothetical or a looking into it. This is my lived experience as a renter in Preston, earning a public school teacher's wage, which in this state, thanks to the state government, have gone down more than 11% over the last 7 years in real terms. And so paying through the nose for an apartment that does not have any air conditioning made this summer, much like most of them, a pretty rough one, and they're only getting rougher from here. This means actual investment in standards. This means not just letting landlords and developers treat an increasing proportion of the population as their own little profit pigs. That means treating people who live in these houses as human beings who deserve a decent standard. That means not knocking down public housing and selling it off to private developers, and that means maintaining standards for both existing and new builds that will account for the increasing harsh conditions caused by the climate crisis.
Okay, so a question here about offshore wind. A number of people have commented that we're seeing around Australia a range of debates and battles about offshore wind. The question is, and it's for each of you, how can you and your party help deliver social licence to expand the operation, or the development and operation of offshore wind? I'll work backwards from Tara to Ged to Kath.
Yeah, thank you. I think that, and far be from a teacher to beat on the drum about education, but it's interesting because I was meeting yesterday with some people who worked in the science and research space, and they said that one of the biggest issues in science and research in Australia is the fact that funding for combating mis and disinformation has significantly been decreased by governments of both major parties. And what we are seeing from that is a massive rise in misinformation around climate change specific. This is the single biggest single biggest sufferer is the misinformation going around impacts on climate. And a lot of that is coming from these same industries that are benefiting from fossil fuels to, spread misinformation, to spread fear in the community around things like offshore wind, around things like wind farms, even onshore, solar, all manner of things like this. So actually investing in science and in education to be able to make that community consultation happen on, let's call it a fairer playing field.
This is a challenge. This is really hard stuff. We're not only facing pushback on wind farms out at sea by people who, let's face it, a lot of people don't want their views disrupted by this. They want to be able to continue to surf and don't think that they'll be close enough for them to have to surf around them or crash into them. And it is a really big challenge. We're also facing a pushback on rewiring the grid. We've got $19 billion to build a new grid, and the National Party is running a terrible scare campaign about the wires and poles that are going to go up. So the farmers in many of these corridors are fighting. You drive over to the country, you see it. We don't want your poles and wires here. This is the reality of why this is hard and why we are really trying our best as a government to navigate these difficult things. Yes, there's education, but that just goes so far. You can't force people to believe something that you tell them. We work really hard with these communities. My good friend Emma McBride, who's up on the North Coast, who's got coasties up there fighting back against wind farms off her coast. We go up there, we sit down with them, we talk to them, we do everything that we did for a just transition to bring those communities along. It's hard. It's really hard.
As a socialist, there's a lot of things that I'm for that governments don't act on. I think it is, it's hard, to be honest, as someone who campaigned, for instance, against a Labor Party that wouldn't support marriage equality for years and years, to hear it's hard because there are people who disagree. Well, when people want progressive change, that apparently isn't as hard for the Labor Party. It actually took, that campaign was finally successful under a Liberal government, which is not how social progress should come about. I agree that we want to have education, that there needs to be community consultation. I think showing in practice that moves to renewables don't make people's lives worse is really important, but that means that you need to get on with that project for real. Let's have something that we can actually see, because all we're seeing at the moment is things getting worse.
Okay, if you want to hang on to the mic, I'll see. Can you hear me all right if I talk loudly rather than move the mic too far up here? So this is a question actually about, we've been talking about Australia and just transitions in Australian regions. This is a question about other countries. So the question goes like this. Assuming we can't continue forever to keep exporting fossil fuels, how do we assist other countries in their transition away from fossil fuels and to renewables? How can we support this shift?
One of the biggest things would be to stop exporting our fossil fuels. That would actually help some of those other countries. And I think being a global leader is important. At the moment, we're a bit of a backward drag on the global movement to end climate change. But it could also mean, there's plenty of money that gets spent on foreign aid, or particularly aid to foreign militaries more often, and, all sorts of awful things. Well, instead, this money could go into just transition programs around the world. But I do think we do need to do it in our own backyard first. I think being a leader, being an example would be a pretty useful way to take things forward.
I agree with Kath on that. We've got to get our own backyard straight, and we are setting about doing that, as I've said for the last 25 minutes, in no small way, absolutely huge way. But we also are quite players on the world stage. We lead by example here by showing what we are doing. We have signed the methane pledge. We're one of the first countries to sign that. As I said, we have a $200 billion industry looking at building green hydrogen. We're going to be one of the first countries to export solar energy from the Northern Territory. We are pushing really hard to host COP here. We're going to have COP I forget which number we're up to, when we're going to have COP. It was announced today that we'll probably be in Adelaide along with our partners in the Pacific. I mean, these, and you know, Australia is looked to. Chris Bowen led like really important negotiations at the last COP. Australia is an example for the world, and we are setting that example, and people are looking to us. So I think that is the best way for, in our region, the best thing we can do, again, is really lead by example and do everything we can to help our Asian partners, everything we can to transition.
Thank you. I think that one of the easiest things to do is to listen to our neighbours when they are asking us to take action on climate change. The biggest global impact Australia is having is through those exports of coal and gas that are so cheaply priced because they are effectively subsidised by the Australian taxpayer. And people who are paying taxes aren't those billionaires, it's working people like many of us in this room. I think the idea of Australia needing to lead the smaller countries in the region is a little bit paternalistic when a lot of them have better climate policies than we do. I think that we can actually be learning a lot from many of them. I think that if we actually start taxing the coal and gas companies properly, we will have money to be able to reinvest in renewables for the region. Because there's probably about 10 seconds left, I do want to question the effort of putting all that of putting effort into hosting COP, considering the last host was an autocratic petrostate.
John, why don't you respond to something that Tara said?
Yes,
because I'm just concerned about that.
Just on the Pacific, they are not emitters. They are not the ones that we are trying to set example for. They are the ones asking us. They have come to us. They have pleaded with us to please lead the way on this for the sake of their very own survival. And I'm very proud to say that we stand with our partners in the Pacific every single step of the way.
So I've got several questions here on the connection between Palestine and Israel and climate change. And there's some general questions, and there's also a direct one to Ged. I'm going to perhaps therefore, Ged, go to you first and then others. So the two questions that are obviously linked here, one is, what's the connection between the genocide of Palestinians by the Israeli government and climate change? And what would you do about this interconnected issue? And there's a linked question here too about and there's lots of votes for this. Can you please ask Ged if she's aware of the detrimental climate impacts of military and genocide? And a question that follows on from that, why is Australia sending coal to Israel? So I'll let Ged answer that pair of questions first.
As far as I know, we are not sending coal to Israel, but I stand to be corrected. Those are things I don't know. Listen, war is bad for climate change. War is terrible for climate change. What is happening in Palestine is shocking. People who know my record on Palestine, I only have a minute, but you would know that I have been an activist for Palestine since terrible events in 1982. I was only 19 years old and it radicalised me. It drove me to be an activist. And I have been a Palestinian activist ever since for Palestinian rights. And, to see 1 million people come and accuse me right now of genocide after should know my background, when they've done nothing over the past 60 years really to get people freed from what is literally a prison in Gaza. But anyway, I am friends with NASA, I work hard with NAPAN, with PARA, I've been on the board of a feeder, I have done so much activism for Palestine over my 40 years of being an activist. But with respect to climate change, war is bad for that. I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, if you asked anyone in the Sudan, anyone in the Congo, anyone in Yemen, where 500,000 people have been killed because of the Houthis, if you ask anyone in Tigray, where 1 million Tigrayans have been killed at the hands of the Ethiopian authorities, if you ask anyone in West Papua, if you ask anyone in any awful conflict that is happening in the world right now, war is bad for climate change.
Ged, I'm going to get you passed to Kath and Tara, and maybe there's a bit of a conversation here, so let's see how we go.
I think if you support Palestine, you got to vote in Parliament to support Palestine. As you continue to vote along, you continue to back a party that supports the genocide in Palestine. That's what's happening. Actually, someone in your party did stand up and got kicked out of the party as a result. That's what it would mean. Wear your keffiyeh in Parliament. Make those arguments on Parliament floor. Use your question time to demand that our government stop backing a genocide. The Labor Party have been connected to Israel for a very, very long time and have continued to support a state that commits the most grotesque human rights abuses. People in this electorate are asking for better, it's not enough to say that you've been an activist, that you're quietly working in the background. You have a platform in Parliament and we need you to use that. And honestly, to do anything less is just not good enough.
I'm going to go to Tara and then perhaps Ged may want to comment as well.
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely. Look, nobody is questioning your record of speaking up for Palestine. You had done so for longer than I've been alive. However, when someone is elected, they are given the power of a vote to use, and unfortunately, the Labor Party, as a bloc, has voted in some cases against their own policy. Hence, what happened to Senator Fatima Payman, against things like even just recognising the statehood of Palestinians. I have been, for as long as I've been able to, speaking up for the cause, including speaking at a Sunday rally a few weeks ago. And much like every Green currently in Parliament would continue to do so once elected. And part of that is no longer sending Australian fossil fuels to Israel.
Ged, did you want to?
This is about climate. Do people want me to? Because we're talking about climate. You just have to look at my record of what I have done and said in this Parliament. I spoke up on UNRWA. It's thanks to people like me in the party that we voted for the first time in the history of this country. We broke with the United States and voted with Palestine at the UN. We voted with Palestine at the World Health Organization. We did support it. We do support it too. I spoke to a recognition of Palestine as a state, to the resolution in Parliament that we put up as a party. But we are here to talk about. Anyone would like to come and talk to me about that afterwards? I'm very, very happy to stand by my record on Palestine. But we're here to talk about climate, as Anne just reminded me. So thank you, Mike.
So a question, I think this one's also for you, Ged. The Office of National Intelligence Climate Risk Assessment, the question is, do you support the immediate public release of that climate risk assessment, and if not, why not?
My understanding is, and I'm not 100% familiar with that risk report, but my understanding is that it does have very sensitive issues in the report to do with national security, and it's way above my pay scale as an assistant minister. It will be discussed at the National Security Council, which I am not on. I don't know what's in the report. It hasn't been shared with me, and it would not be in my position. So I can't really answer that question.
Can I ask a question about land clearing? So, land clearing, including native forest logging, are big and, according to the questions here, often overlooked drivers of climate change. What will you do to stop this from happening? I guess this is a question about what will you do to reduce land clearing and native forest logging. I might start from Tara.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that something that's got to be considered is the fact that the state has an immense amount of power here, but due to state capture by a lot of these donors, there is a lot of propping up of industries that is going on, including native forest logging. I grew up in Tasmania, lived with I've seen a lot of absolutely horrific logging take place down there. And that was not even logging that the markets were asking for. That was logging that was being propped up by a state government that was just very desperate to keep a particular industry going. And I think that we absolutely can and should, but it's not going to happen while we continue to have governments that are led by parties that take these corrupt donations from the corporations that are continuing to do native forest logging and the like.
Do you want me to go next?
Yes, yes.
Is that okay? Can I just take the opportunity to thank Kath Rouse and all her wonderful people here who I know fought so hard to stop logging in Victoria. Congratulations, you did a fantastic job. If we ever get to an EPBC Act, it will bring all forestry projects under environmental standards. So even the logging industry itself has recognised that, you know, RFAs will probably be a thing passed under a new EPBC Act. So we haven't got an EPBC Act. Let's get one. I would really like a new one.
Yeah, but that act, like you can actually ban that logging. This, if it isn't already, this is land that can be publicly acquired, that you can ban logging. This is what needs to happen, and certainly there should be no government funding or propping up or subsidies to these industries. And the political parties that claim to be for climate should not take any donations from these. I think, yeah, we need to both stop the logging immediately and also, immense massive project of rewilding. In a lot of instances, that's happening in small communities, and it's the work of volunteers who should be extremely proud of their work. But actually, again, these are just more like possible jobs, things that people could be retrained in, as part of a just transition. This should be a major state project.
There's a question here about local waterways. What will you do to support and regenerate local waterways, which I guess is broadly a climate question, but I imagine it's also a question about waterways in Cooper. Tara, do you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, this is both a very broad and a very precise question, which makes it tricky to answer in the space of a minute. A lot of this is going to come down to making sure that, firstly, that there is a public, not a private or public-private partnership, there is a public body that has responsibility for waterways and for their care, and making sure that it is properly resourced with an eye to the future, not one that is constantly worried about having the funds to do its job year after year. I think that those are going to be very crucial for any waterway, whether we're talking about the Mary and Darebin creeks that are very local and beloved to us here, or waterways on the other side of the country.
Ged and Kath?
Well, our waterways are incredibly precious. We all love them. We love the Mary Creek, we love the Darebin Creek, Edgar's Lake, and I just want to acknowledge Kate Joss is here from Friends of Edgar's Lake. We've got a lot of people here, I'm sure, from Friends of Mary Creek, Friends of Darebin Creek, and the management committees that run them. They are incredibly dedicated people, and I'm really proud to say that I have, since my time here, I've watched the great work they do. We've been able to support them. We had $1 million at last term that we supported the waterways with. We just announced another $3 million today that will go to the lake, go to Edwards Creek and the Mary and Darebin Creeks. We want to support the people that work there, and we need really, if I had my druthers and there was something that I could do, we listened to them. They told us today that they really need ongoing funding for operational works. It's one thing to do project funding, but they would like operational funding, and that's something I'm prepared to talk to them about. The other thing that I'm really proud of is supporting Indigenous rangers who've been doing cultural burns along the creek, and those cultural burns have seen grasses, native grasses, come back that we haven't seen for decades and decades. This is really exciting work. They've identified trees. That's just, okay, that's all I've got.
Thanks. Yeah, I really like a bunch of the things that both the candidates have said. I think one of the things we definitely want to end the profiteering on water trading and crack down on the stealing of water by agribusiness. I think we need a significant pollution tax for all of the businesses that get away time and time again with harming our waterways and our parks. I support the demand of the Friends of Mary Creek to declare that area a national park through public acquisition of the land, to ensure that there's access to that green space, that people can be educated in and appreciating this area. Victorian Socialists will advocate for the National Land Care Program, which is like the sort of, and the small grants to environment groups for funding increases there have been between 10,000 and 100,000 per year for groups with like a proven track record, and bring Parks Victoria back into public hands.
That's crucial, that bill.
Yeah.
Very helpful, thank you. Kath, I'll stay with you actually. There's a couple of questions quite specifically about how people will operate in Parliament. And this first one's for you. So I've just got to find it quickly. The question for you, Kath, was, question for Kath. What will you do in Parliament that a Greens candidate wouldn't?
Well, I think, and probably the Labor supporters in the room are not going to like this, but I think I would compromise a lot less than the Greens. That was one of the big lessons I learnt out of the marriage equality campaign, was that accepting compromises that make you less than equal are not the way forward. It was ignoring and disagreeing with, arguing against attempts to just accept civil unions or some other thing to make us equal. I think that, the idea of, you can't let the perfect get in the way of the good, but actually I don't think what we're seeing is good. I think that the recent policies around climate change that were passed by Labor with the support of the Greens did not do enough to actually have a serious impact. So yeah, I think one of the things that I would do differently is stand my ground and rely on community activism and campaigning. And I know that there are Greens members as individuals who do that, but when I go to picket lines and protest, there are hundreds of Socialists and maybe dozens of Greens.
So there's a question here for Tara and for Ged. Maybe I'll use, I'll try the microphone. So the question goes like this. Tara, how will your party work productively with Labor? And Ged, how will your party work productively with the Greens to achieve climate emergency action?
This is one that spurred 1,000 comment sections over the last couple of decades or so. Look, every time we see an impasse between Labor and the Greens, we have a situation where Labor, who have much better ability to get their message out due to advertising money, media contacts, things of this nature, are always going to be on the Greens are refusing to compromise, and it's usually less a question of compromise and more a question of just even coming to the table. We saw this on all manner of things. But when we do have both parties coming to the table, we achieve really fantastic things. Again, I think it's really, because we have a Labor Party that, for good reason, likes to talk about what it has achieved, but we never hear them talk about the program that had the greatest reduction in emissions that we have seen this century, because for them to talk about it would require them talking about collaborating with the Greens, who sent them back to the drawing board after inadequate legislation was put forward.
We have, is it 16 crossbenchers in the reps, and we work really well with all of them. Part of my job as an assistant minister is to sit down and brief the crossbench. We go through every piece of legislation. We work really hard with them. If they have questions, if they want compromise, if they want change, we sit down and we work through it. The people that I tend to work through are in the health portfolio, Jordan Steele John, and Larissa Waters has been, we work hard with her on all sorts of health issues. And so, where we can, we get through. Where we can't, we don't, and they don't vote for things. That's just the way the Parliament works. But I'm sure, as you know me, I'm a very open person. I'm really open to suggestions. I go in to get the best outcome that I possibly can. I think my trade union training has done that for me. I spent my whole life negotiating as, in the nurses union or the ACTU. That's what I do. I negotiate, and I do. If I might sing my own praises, I think I do okay. So yeah, it's what I would do. It's what I always do. So I keep doing it.
So thank you. I think we're just about out of time, in fact, but that probably leads me back to, we're going to give everyone a minute or two. Thank you. We're going to give everyone a minute or two, 2 minutes, in fact, to sum up, if you like. And perhaps it takes me back to, there's a question here right at the top, which has had probably the most votes, in fact, but it's a general question, and it's, what are the priority actions you'll take in the next 3 years to mitigate climate impact and ensure our grandchildren inherit a livable planet? And I suspect it's a question it's on everybody's mind. So I think we'll go in reverse order to what we did at the beginning. So it'll go Kath, Ged, Tara. 2 minutes to make your final pitch, if you like. And you might like to bear in mind that large question about action that will really make a difference for our children and our grandchildren. So I'll pass this down to you, Kath, just 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think that one of the biggest things that we can do is, I guess, Victorian Socialist central policy, which is that we need to bring power into public hands and use that to rapidly transition to 100% of renewables by 2030. We need to be looking at a zero emissions economy by 2035. We need this action, we need it drastically. We need to totally, radically transform the economy to allow for this to happen. More investment in public transport. We just need, this is an urgent action. It needs to be taken urgently, and I do think it starts with bringing power back into public hands to, make this easier, more affordable for everyone, alongside that just transition. I guess as part of my final pitch, I would say, if you like what I've said today, if you jump on the Victorian Socialist website, you like what we stand for overall, voting for us is a really useful way to maximise your vote and to send a message. The truth is, I'm not going to get elected this time round. I certainly hope that we will be looking at getting a socialist into the parliament in the not too distant future in this country. But this seat, the two-party preferred between Labor and the Greens, one of these two will end up getting elected. But I think that they could both serve to do better on the question of climate, on the question of housing, on the question of inequality. And a really powerful way to send that message to the major parties, I think, is to give your first preference vote to Socialists. Your second preference will then flow down. The full value of your vote transfers over. Personally, I'll be recommending a second vote for Tara. As lovely as Ged is, I just don't think the Labor Party deserve to retain this seat when they stand at the moment for genocide, for planet destruction, and for worsening living standards for working class people.
Thanks, Kath. Well, with your help, in just 3 years, the Labor government has turned this country's national climate policy from denial to action. And you've done it. I feel like we've done that together. We've legislated emission targets, we've invested billions in renewables, we've rewired the grid, we're embedding climate in every part of government. But importantly, we're doing it with climate justice at the centre, side by side with workers, with the regions and with First Nations people. And I'm incredibly proud to say that since I've been there, we are also focusing on people's health when it comes to climate change, because we can't leave anyone behind, and I have absolutely no intention of doing that. We can't risk another decade of inaction and denial. Everyone on this stage, all of us, we all want to get to the same place. There's absolutely no doubt about that, and everybody has policies to get there. But really, you need somebody in a party of government. Labor is a party of government that can have the difficult conversations right across this country, from the Hunter to far north Queensland, from Collie to Tasmania, and right here in Thornbury. There's plenty of climate deniers right here. I had a very difficult conversation just yesterday. I haven't got time to tell you. It's not easy, but we are doing it. We are building the walls, we are laying the foundations, we are doing the plumbing and the rewiring, we are building the foundation so that we can put that cap on that each and every one of us here wants to be done. And I need to stay doing this, I need you with me, because that future is something that we all build together. And I need you to know really that I do everything I can, and you know it, that I take your voices to Parliament. I take your voices to that table, and you can rest assured that while I am there, they will hear you. So thank you.
thank you so much. Thank you, Kath and Ged, and thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and to DCAN for organising. When I think about priority actions that can be taken as soon as the next Parliament opens, I think of ending subsidies and handouts to fossil fuels and to the biggest polluters in this country. I think of ending the opening of new coal and gas projects that has continued. And I think about how when we discuss things in terms of values, not in terms of party allegiances, which kind of defaults to footy teams for a lot of us, particularly in this city, when we instead talk about what people want to see, what people's values are, people want more than is on offer. Everyone in this room wants to see more climate action, and we need to actually represent that. And I know that when we can have a government that is engaging properly, that is consulting, that is running citizens' assemblies, we will see those increased demands for more and more urgent action on the climate emergency. We know that there are so many people concerned about the lack of action on the climate emergency, as there are so many people concerned about the lack of action on the housing and cost of living crises, on the genocide that is going on in Palestine, on all manner of issues, and we want to stand up for that, but we cannot expect to get different results if we continue to maintain the political status quo. So it's important to have a strong progressive crossbench to keep up now and to push Labor to do better on the climate. Thank you.
So, just two final reflections before I hand over to Anne for her concluding comments. First, some thank yous to DCAN for organising tonight's forum. To all three candidates for their time and care, not just in contributing to tonight's debate, but for all their hard work. It's hard work, I hear, campaigning, and contributing to this election. And to everyone who's come along to listen and to ask such thoughtful and incisive questions. It seems to me, and I'm guilty of this too, many of us sometimes underestimate how lucky we are to live in a country with such strong democratic traditions and systems. And there's a few countries around the world that we can think of that don't have that at the moment. And the Australian electoral system may not be perfect, particularly when we have so many sections of the media steadfastly refusing to focus on crucial urgent issues like the climate emergency and climate justice. But I think that just makes it even more important that we take every opportunity to support and sustain grassroots democratic debates and events such as tonight's forum, and to give careful thought to the way in which we will cast our vote on May the 3rd. Noting my earlier reflections on the challenges of facing a harsh climate future with our eyes and our hearts wide open, I thought I'd just conclude with a very short quote from the great American historian Howard Zinn. And he said this: "To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It's based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness. And if we remember those times and places, and there are many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act, and at least the possibility of sending this spinning top of a world in a different direction." Thank you, and over to you.
John, that was lovely words to end with. So my job is just to close things off. And first of all, let me add my thanks to the candidates for coming along. We know how busy your lives are at this particular point in time. I really appreciate your willingness to be put on the spot and your ability to listen to each other respectfully. I think we've had a good example here of how democracy ought to work. Yeah. Secondly, my thanks to John for his great job as MC or moderator or chair or whatever you were. Whatever you did brilliantly. Thank you very much. I think that the candidates and you, the audience, have made his task much easier than it might have been with your civility and willingness to listen to each other respectfully. But you've really contributed in your knowledge of the issues and ability to encapsulate things and keep everybody under control. So thank you very much, and have a very small token of thanks for you. I also want to thank Span Community House for allowing us to use this venue and being so helpful. And I think Carmen is here, so thank you very much. And then from me, my thanks to all the DCAN volunteers. It's amazing how many jobs there are in putting on a forum like this, and there are too many people to mention who've contributed to tonight, but I'm deeply grateful for you all. And thanks, of course, to all of you for coming. We were booked out just a few days after opening this, starting to publicise this event, so we're really grateful to be in a community that cares so much about this issue. Please look out for our scorecards. They will be out very soon with our assessment of for both the Senate and the, it isn't really a scorecard, it's more of a guide for the House of Reps for helping thinking through the issues and putting climate first when you vote. If anybody is interested in helping to distribute these scorecards at places like train stations and stuff, do come to the end at the table at the end afterwards. We would love your help in doing that. Also, before you leave, visit the stall at the bottom, at the back, where we have lots of signs. This one is going out like hotcakes, and I saw some CANA, the Climate Action Network of Australia, came up with statistics that a house sign gets seen. I can't remember, I'm hopeless at numbers, but it was like between 1,000 and 10,000 views. If you have one of these on your fence, it can really make a difference, and it can also start conversations with your friends and family and neighbours. So do think about doing that. And also just talk about what you've learned tonight with everybody you know. Encourage everyone to be thinking about climate, which really is the thing that is going to determine our kids' and our grandkids' future more than anything else that we can think of. So with that, thank you all very much, and I hope you have a good evening.